Okay, it's 2 minutes after. We'd like to start on time and finish on time, if not a little bit early if possible, so let's get going. Welcome to today's webinar from Gluware titled Automate Your Network OS Upgrades at Scale. So here we are towards the very end of the year, so thank you all for joining towards just before the holiday season here. So hope everyone is getting ready to have a great break. Let's get moving. Very quick introduction. So today's speaking here is Michael Howe. I'm VP of Product Management at Gluware. I have over 20 years of experience in computer networking, starting my career in network operations and network engineering and network architecture before moving on into other roles like product management and marketing and others. But needless to say, I've kind of suffered the pain that we deal with in networking with a lot of complicated protocols, a lot of unique vendor platforms. And I was at a team early in my career in operations where I was responsible for upgrading networks and network devices, and it was always very stressful. And then later on, not too far later on, I was certifying operating systems for deployment into the IBM Global Network as well as the customer networks we managed. And so I think that ties very well into today's session. Joining me today is Alex Rougeau. He's a solution architect for Gluware based out of San Diego. Alex has over 10 years of network experience and has been a network administrator and network engineer and has helped to roll out Gluware to many of the Fortune 100 customers that we have today. So good to have him on. Alex will be running our live demonstration. Just kind of jumping in very, very high level, oftentimes when you think of the underlying network, the very first word, if it was one word to describe it, is complexity, right? So what makes up that complexity? It's multi-vendor. Even if you have primarily one vendor, it's multi-platform. You have equipment that's been going in for years. Oftentimes we work with customers with equipment more than 10 years old. You can't refresh the network every year or every 5 years. You're dealing with multiple operating systems, and that's a piece we're going to touch on here. Hopefully that's something you're getting under control in your organization, but you're having to deal with security patches and operating system updates, and that's really one of the main pain points that we're going to focus on here. And then also the ongoing configuration changes, the maintenance type work, as well as new feature deployment. And a lot of this is done manually today. So with Gluware, again, kind of jumping to the punchline is that with Gluware turnkey network automation, we're able to deliver efficiency, enhanced security, and agility across your network. And these are some statistics taken directly from real customer success. So things like reduction in 98% time to deploy global changes, moving from not updating equipment in multiple years to being able to update monthly, and moving towards agility where any change request can be handled within 24 hours. And so for large organizations, that is a very rapid response when it used to be days or weeks to get to certain network changes. So jumping into the challenge here, and this is something I think all network folks who work on networks in any capacity will acknowledge, is that the paradox in networking is that networks are often, and even your compensation, you're often evaluated based on stability or the word uptime. It's keep the network up and running all the time. We don't want downtime. But the business running on the network is demanding agility. They're saying, please keep making changes, make these incremental changes to add users, add services, change QoS so my application performs better. And oh yeah, reduce the risk. Make sure the network is not exposed to vulnerabilities and bugs and other hacks that could lead to disaster, right? Because those things are really contradicting, right? Agility and stability. The result is that network operations is very risk averse. You talk to anyone in network ops, is they want to limit the changes on the network. And one of the biggest, most disruptive changes you can make is an operating system upgrade. When you change OSs, you're going into a whole new operating system that has a different set of known issues. It has a different feature set, and therefore is different from what you've known, the known quantity. So hopefully, and we'll get into this, but you need to have testing and approval cycles to make sure the operating systems going into your network are as known as they can be in terms of knowing feature sets and knowing limitations or bugs that may be exposed. But the network is often behind on requirements, behind on updates, and we hear this all the time. Oftentimes, and we'll get into a couple customer case studies where this equipment's sitting out there and they have very little maintenance windows or time to make changes. So for big disruptive changes like an OS upgrade, which could take an hour, they don't have time to do it. They can't get it scheduled. So you'll go multiple years not getting that done. And ultimately, that is built up technical debt. You're dealing with potentially vulnerabilities, bugs, and issues that are kind of pent up or there that could be exposed at any time and actually create an outage. And so it truly is a paradox. What we're going to talk about really in this webinar is how do you take action and break through? And then really the point here is automation. And when you talk automation, there's two main areas you need to address. One, what most would consider now maybe the easier side is the technology. And you want to implement tested, automated processes that change and enable agility with stability. So if you automate in the right way, you're going to get the best of both worlds. You're going to enable rapid changes, but you're also going to maintain stability. What we often recommend and what you'll see with Gluware is you can start small, you can build off that success, you can do things like automating your inventory, you can automate monitoring config change, you monitor auditing. So all those things are really read-only before moving into the potentially more disruptive changes of an operating system upgrade or configuration change and config change management. The bigger piece that we find organizations struggle with is the culture. So we definitely recommend, and we're talking to customers, is that you really need to get buy-in from top down in your organization to support and fund and even deem automation as a true strategic project where they're not saying, yes, guys, my network engineers, my team, please go off and spend part of your time learning automation, where they really focus on the tooling and the skill set, and it's a dedicated effort, and they're even measured and rewarded for implementing automated processes. And the organizations we've seen begin to do this are really breaking through and really changing the way, and then also improving their lifestyle and the quality of work with the reduced maintenance windows and things like that. So getting into today's session, I've already begun to speak to it, but I have roughly 20 minutes, about 10 or 15 more minutes here of the challenges related to operating system management. We're going to just reintroduce the Gluware platform for network automation for folks that may be brand new to it. And also, I'm going to do a quick overview of the new OS Manager app that we're highlighting in this session that was new in our recently released Gluware 3.6. And then I'm going to turn it over to Alex, and we're going to do a live product demo so you can really get a feel for it. And he's going to demonstrate the OS Manager app. I want to pause here for a quick second and say, within the Zoom client here, please make sure you know where the bar is to expose the Q&A and that you're able to click on that and submit questions. So please submit questions along the way. We'd like to address those at the end. You won't have the ability to speak. Your audio won't be live, but we'll look through those questions and we'll answer them live at the end of the session. Also to mention, this session is being recorded, so it will be made available on demand. If you're watching it on demand, you can always email in questions to sales@gluware.com, and we could address your specific use cases. So moving on, the challenge of the operating system management. As mentioned, I had roles in both engineering and architecture, and oftentimes you have responsibility that covers some of these bullet items, like, is my running operating system affected by a security advisory? So security advisories are put out by the vendors. They are obligated to do this, I believe, legally. And so they issue things, if you're familiar with Cisco, has things called PCERT. It's a security advisory. And it's a constant job within an organization to assess those advisories and see how you're affected. So is it something where there's a config workaround, or is it a security advisory that's affected by a protocol or feature I'm not using? So you have to assess this. Next is looking at your inventory. Is the operating system you're running going end of life or end of sale? Oftentimes this puts you in a tough place, because if you were to have an issue, hit a bug or hit an issue, the vendor is not, they've disclosed they're not fixing it anymore. So you have to go and make sure that in most organizations, they have a policy not to run software that's out of maintenance, probably a better term for it. So is the software going out of maintenance? Therefore, you got to plan an operating system upgrade and get to a newer version or even newer hardware before you go end of life, end of sale. The third is another key one that drives upgrades is in the current running operating system, do we have the features we need that the business is demanding? I'll give you a quick example. We help customers automate network admission control, or NAC. If you saw our November webinar, we highlighted a feature where we automated NAC, so you can go check that out. But with NAC, it's running a protocol called 802.1x, and so the underlying operating system has to support that protocol. So we've helped customers deploy NAC, and usually one of the first projects we have to do for them, help them inventory, help them assess, and then help them determine which products that they're looking to enable NAC on actually have the proper version of operating system upgrade or version, and then get to an upgrade, and then get at a third step is that then to deploy the protocol and enable that feature. So that's very common. That software upgrades are largely driven by features that are in a newer release of code. And then finally, just a question of, do we need to perform this upgrade? And I think the problem is you may have reasons to upgrade, but then you'll come along and say, we need to do this upgrade, and operations or someone will push back and say, look, we don't have the maintenance window. So I know you want it, I know you need it, we can't do it because we don't have the time. With the change you're asking to make takes 4 hours or 6 hours or however long, we can't afford that interruption, and therefore it could disrupt the process. So when you look at the operational side of things, operations has multiple tools, different vendor tools, homegrown tools, different things that they have. But when you ask them to do a task, usually a small percentage of it is able to accomplish with the tools they have. And so you result in a mostly manual effort. Therefore, something like an OS upgrade could take on the order of 1 hour at least per device. So if you're doing that manually, the math gets fairly painful when you start to think about dozens or hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of devices that may need an update. When you consider things out there that enable automation like scripts are very limited and very rigid. By rigid, I mean they only have the capability that's explicitly programmed. And so oftentimes you're not going to pre-program in lots of pre-checks and lots of post-checks and verifications and the ability to deal with the variables that are ultimately in the network, and therefore scripts are often very limited. Finally, the human component, the time, the effort, the skill. So oftentimes organizations say, we just don't have the time or the effort, and it's a part-time job. And then really when they look at automating, they assign someone as a side project, and they don't make a lot of progress on that. So therefore, current state is mostly manual, which is really limiting what they're able to accomplish, right? So now we get to Gluware, and our proposal into how we help organizations solve this problem is about bringing turnkey automation to your enterprise, or a product line that does not require significant programming skill sets. It's really a no-code type of program with turnkey applications. And so a very quick highlight of what the Gluware platform offers is that it is all based on an intelligent orchestration engine. Gluware can either run from the cloud like AWS, or recently we've added support for Microsoft's Azure cloud. And so Gluware is pure software. We can run from the cloud or on-prem. You can install as one or more virtual machines. Alex will be talking a little bit more specifically about installation options. But we're pure software. The orchestration engine then provides an API interface to a fully web-based application layer. Users just through a web page sign into Gluware and then have access to that application. So we like to use the analogy, it's a bit like a smartphone where you have iOS running on an Apple device, and then you have your various apps that you navigate into. Gluware is similar in that respect. But the power is that all of the applications leverage the common intelligent orchestration engine, which is data model driven. Everything we read from the network layer, when we read via CLI or API, we wrap it in a data model. That gives us the ability to take things that are non-programmatic, like static CLI, wrap JSON-based data modeling around it, and make it programmatic. So therefore, we can do things like in control and device manager perform a dynamic inventory. We have API integration with Cisco to do an assessment, like look at things like PCERT and end of sale, and to support SmartNet contract status. When you look at drift and audit, this application can monitor devices for config changes and notify you when someone's made a change that potentially may need to get remediated. The audit side of it enables that kind of compliance piece to say, is my configuration in policy or not in policy? And then the highlight of this particular session we're going to get into with the demo is OS Manager. OS Manager is new in Gluware 3.6, and it is built to replace a previous app we had called OS Update. And Gluware has been doing automating OS upgrades since we came to market in 2011. We've always had a capability of operating system managed upgrade. When in our 3.0 platform, which is kind of our latest generation of platform, we introduced OS Update about a year and a half ago, and our customers really liked it. Again, the ability to automate. So OS Manager is built on that underlying technology. But we've had a year and a half to capture feedback from users, and they wanted an app that was more operational focused. So more guardrails, more controls, and something that wasn't as intermixed with our configuration management of how we previously did it. So OS Manager is new. However, it is leveraging the power of the OS Update engine, which we've had in the market for over a year and a half. So that's important to note. And the OS Update capability will remain in the product until our customers that are using it transition over. So that's important to note as well. Config modeling is our technology for configuration management. Our approach is not to dictate how you configure your devices. Our approach is to read from the network, bring your configurations into Gluware, then enable you to determine what the proper policies are for features like NTP and syslog and DNS and all these things, and then allow you to centrally manage them. So with Gluware, it is a kind of a bring your own config, bring your own design style, and then Gluware will intelligently automate it. The big differentiation is because the intelligent orchestration engine is declarative, we have the ability to read, compare to the desired state, and then only make the changes that are necessary. One of the significant components of that is that we remove things that are out of policy. So in my intro, I talked about minimal changes. Oftentimes, people are asked to make changes to the network and add. So you're incrementally adding configuration all the time. But rarely is there a job that or a request that comes in that says, hey, go clean up the old configuration. When you implement policy-based config management, you're inherently cleaning up the configuration every time you configure. Finally, the last app to talk to is Workflows. Workflows allows us to stitch together any Gluware function into a wizard-style workflow to let you step through the things you're looking to do, and also do other device interactions like read operational state, or do external API calls to something like ServiceNow or Remedy. So workflows are there as you're operationalizing those components. So a very quick view of what does it look like when I consume Gluware. Well, first and foremost, generally, once you get the administrative tasks out of the way, you run Device Manager, you perform an inventory and an assessment to get to a known state of what is in my network, what operating systems I'm running, and what state are they in. And we're at 16 vendors, 21 operating systems today. Next is using Drift and Audit to, again, monitor for config change and start executing audits, either custom audits or compliance-based audits, and understand how far in or out of policy those devices are. Finally, the one we're highlighting today, OS Manager, it's about getting to a state where you're able to upgrade your operating system, and we're going to talk about that in a lot of detail. Config modeling I talked to is where you're beginning to really truly model and implement policy-based configuration management of those devices and sets of devices. And then workflows, as you begin to say, okay, these are the common task operations is doing. I want them built into a very simple stepwise execution. And then finally, API integrations. Gluware is very API capable to not only integrate with things via API, but we've also done integration with products like Ansible, where there's a module we published with 3.6 and also other components coming we published a plugin. We will be publishing modules that essentially enable Ansible to call Gluware APIs to leverage things like Device Manager today and going into Drift and Audit and others in the near future. So I think we've kind of covered that. So let's dive into OS Manager a little bit, and I want to ensure I'm not running too much over on time here because I'm just about at my time limit. So this will be very quick. OS Manager, as I said, is a canned application which is built for centralized control with integrated file server capabilities. And this is a big distinction because our previous capabilities, we did not include a file server. It had to be customer provided. We've found that by providing the file server and supporting the capability for a distributed file server is much more powerful, because then we can monitor both sides of the communication and also put distributed file servers out closer to the devices to better facilitate those upgrades. So the app is built for network operations, and it integrates tons of the pre-checks and post-change validation. So all those, again, dozens of steps that you would do in a procedure that would take well over an hour per device is fully automated. It's highly scalable and reliable. We don't really have the time, but we can go into how Gluware can be a fully distributed system. And then with Gluware, you get very detailed logs and results, so you understand what took place. And even if you run into a problem, those detailed logs will help you work through either the vendor issue, or you can share it with Gluware, and we can quickly turn any fixes necessary, which are sometimes required when you're automating. So how do you use OS Manager? Well, there's a few pre-requirements. You need Gluware installed and set up, and the app running and licensing there. Next is you inventory your network devices. You bring them into Gluware, and optionally you can run that assessment. Oftentimes this is a really important step because you want to know what operating systems am I running, what are they exposed to. Then using OS Manager, you can use it to pre-test the operating systems upgrades in a lab, and essentially you're validating the operating system that you're going to be deploying. And once you validate that, you have to ensure it's added to our file server so that we can service that image. So what you're going to see from Alex when you're executing an upgrade, we have this notion of a plan. So you create a plan where you're allocating the devices that are going to be getting upgraded, the images that are going to be assigned to those devices, and then Gluware has a step to validate your plan. When you validate, it executes a series of pre-checks to ensure that plan is now ready to run. So once you've validated it, step 2 is you can then schedule it or run it ad hoc, meaning kick off the execution now. It all depends on what you're doing in that plan, because if you're just transferring the image, it's not disruptive. If you are actually executing the upgrade, it potentially can be disruptive, right? Depending on your high availability configuration in your network. A plan is run only once. Back to operational best practices is you want a record of everything that has been done. So that plan has been executed. If it ran to completion, you're in a good state. If it failed, you could figure out what changes you need to make and then run again. But you don't rerun the same plan. You clone the plan, you edit or make any changes, and then you run your new plan. So what you're going to see from Alex is it is all plan-based. And again, this is based on feedback from customers and operations who really want to leverage best practices in operations. So very, very quickly, again, I want to get to the heart of it with Alex in the demo. A couple quick case studies. Merck Pharmaceuticals, one that has given us public endorsement, a very large global network, geographically dispersed. We talk a lot about one of their first use cases for them, automating QoS, but one of the big pain points for them was automating operating system upgrades. And the main pain for them is that when they look at these campuses and manufacturing floors and other things, they're a mission critical network. Any network disruption could impact business. So they have very few or very limited maintenance windows. And when you look at their processes, again, back to the well over an hour per device, Merck was able to get to, dozens, if not hundreds of devices within an hour executing using Gluware. So they're really thrilled with their ability to automate OS upgrades, automate that process down, get it done within the maintenance window, and get sites that hadn't been updated in many years up to a current new approved version. Salvatore Ranazizi, director over there at Merck, shared Gluware enables us to keep the pace with the rapid changes and continually tune our network, keep software up to date, and keep the network fully compliant with Merck standards. So it's very, very key. And again, OS upgrade or OS management is only one piece of the puzzle. Next, a mid-sized business out of Kansas City called Terracon, another public reference for us. They have a data center at about 140 branches, primarily Cisco when you look at the routing and switching makeup. And when they used Gluware to perform inventory of the roughly 400 switches, they uncovered that they had more than 70 unique operating systems running. So they didn't have excellent processes in place to pre-stage devices. Basically, devices were coming from their supplier and being installed and being turned up, and they're resulting in lots of different OSs running. So when you have that, you have inconsistencies. You have maybe inconsistent feature sets. You have inconsistent bugs or exposures, and that was kind of manifesting. And the gentleman who took over the data center engineering, the network engineering, was really focused on solving that problem. So implemented Gluware, was able to automate inventory and assessment using config drift to monitor changes, but also automate those upgrades. So when that, even though they're not pre-staging it, when that device goes out, they're able to then remotely kick off an upgrade and get to standardized OS. So they're achieving agility with a very lean IT team. And so Patrick from Terracon said, we've been able to automate configs and continually OS upgrades for our network equipment across sites, saving valuable time and resources, reducing costs, and helping us be far more agile. So with that, I want to stop sharing on my part and turn it over to Alex for a live demonstration. So I will stop sharing. Alex, if you could share.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen okay. And thanks, Mike, for the introduction. And yeah, just to jump right into it and explain kind of how the system operates and how the platform operates. Essentially, Gluware, I have a master server that is set up, and I have my master server, meaning it's my control. It's a Linux operating system, and I have all the underlying packages. And we have additional file servers that can be deployed in different regions. In this case here, for this case of this demo, they're just running, everything is within the same segment, within the same network. But let's jump right into the Gluware platform here. And as of 3.5 or as of 3.6 release, we've now introduced, to reiterate again, file server is now a new thing, and the OS manager. So, how is the process that we go on the file server is, we, on a per organization basis, we can give access to these file servers that are distributed. So in this case here, I go to system settings, I go to organizations, OS management, and for the active organization that I have selected, in this case is my Gluware organization, I have added a file server. So with this file server, now I can specify the ports and services to be used that I want to use to perform these file transfers. And again, these ports are open only at the time of the transfer that is being executed. These ports are shut down otherwise, and you will not be able to scan or be able to connect to these ports unless you're doing a file transfer on that device. Down here, we have a sections to enable catalogs. And with catalogs, essentially, is where architects can test and validate their images in their environment, right? So you have your environment before you push anything in your production. You have to validate an image. So you use Gluware to push those images and validate it in your lab. And as you're upgrading your devices and hey, everything seems to be working okay, the commands haven't changed, so on and so forth, then you can approve those messages and create those messages as part of a catalog. And depending on the level of users that you set your catalog to, in this case here, I have a catalog editor set to write admin. And I set my options to use catalog is for all users that are subordinate roles, or essentially all users that have a less permission than a write admin, they must use a catalog. So what that means is if my role falls within a system developer, a system admin, I have the options to use a catalog or simply pick from any images that has been uploaded on the file server. However, if a user is of a read-only or operations administrator, they are not able to pick any images that are available in the file server. They're only able to pick images that have been approved and have been put in catalogs for the specific platforms. And then additionally down here, we have a plain execution. And we found that, it depends on the user and it depends on the use case. In some cases, it's possible that you prefer to upgrade your devices in a linear job, meaning that, hey, I decide to upgrade 20 devices and Gluware is going to perform this execution one at a time. And it's going to keep track of the, whether it's failure rates and success rates. And if you want to abort after a specific percentage, you can opt to do so. But in most of the cases, we found that our users want to be able to tackle more devices at the same time, as they have a maintenance window. The network is scheduled, it's okay to be down, so they can bring down more devices at the same time. So that's, and that's once this system is set up here, then the next step is to jump into the file server. I'll go ahead and I'll jump into that. And in the file server is where I maintain the inventory of my images. Within my images here, I can create new directories. Let's see. I can create new directories and put images under, different images, and within each folder to organize these images according to them. Let's see, if I want to upload an image, it's as simple as, hey, I can select, I want to upload an image. I want to specify some ASA images here, even though it's uploading to the, let's see, here we go. I get to specify what type of image it is and whether I want to put these images under a specific catalog. In this case, I don't want to assign them to a catalog. I just want to go ahead and start uploading. So Gluware is go ahead and it's going to upload these images. And once they're done uploading, right, you can see the status is here, they will be synced to the file servers that are distributed within the different regions, or however they are distributed. So in this case, I have some images that are already synced, have been uploaded, some images that are syncing. And once those images are synced, they'll be available for me to use. So essentially, the file server, it's as simple as uploading the different images, and the images will now we use rsync to sync those images to the different file servers. Once that process is done, now we get to jump into the OS Manager application itself. And in the OS Manager is where we can create catalogs, we can create upgrade plans, so on and so forth, and to be able to execute those. So in this case here, I have created some catalogs for different types of devices. And with those catalogs, I'm just going to open one up here. I can create a catalog on a per device basis, and I can specify if the only thing you must be familiar with is regular expression. And with the regular expression, we match on a device SKU number. So in this case, I'm looking for, hey, any SKU number that begins with SRX, and then there is some type of digit after, then it's going to match whatever device is in my inventory will be populated here. And then based on the images that are available in my file servers, I can select and assign to this catalog. So if I look at a different device here, I'll look at an ISR 4300. Hey, I have multiple regular expressions, multiple SKU numbers that can match, and any device in my inventory that matches that will be added. Same thing with the images. So once catalogs are created, another view here is the devices that are listed in OS Upgrade. These are the devices that are currently supported for the OS Upgrade application. As we're quickly upgrading and adding support to new vendor and platforms, and as we have different applications within Gluware, we may start out, if we start supporting a new vendor, we may start out supporting it, hey, today we're able to discover this new device. We can add to our inventory, we can discover everything about it. And then, we are quickly adding more features to be able to support those devices or platforms within all of the additional Gluware applications, whether that's being able to add or put configurations using config modeling, which is one of our other applications. Doing config drifts and audit, which is being able to catch any time a configuration changes, to being able to audit your configuration for any changes or for any specific items that you're looking for, and of course OS Manager, and that's to being able to upgrade your devices. In this case here, I may have, it's possible that in my inventory device manager, I have more devices than the 19 that are being listed here. And the reason that the 19 are being listed here is because these are the devices that are supported by Gluware, and that's automatically populated. So once I have created, I've uploaded my images, I've created my catalog with my images, the next step is to create an upgrade plan. An upgrade plan, these are intended to be, a single-use plan so that, we can maintain a history for specific actions. And it could be that today I need to upgrade this set of devices. I specify a ticket order, a ServiceNow ticket, or a remedy, or any type of outside, ticketing system that you may use. And this is the action that I want to do. So as we create these plans, I can, I select the type of plan that I want to do, whether I want to do a transfer only, whether I want to deploy the new image on the device, which is doing the transfer and doing the upgrade itself. And additionally as well, I can select to take, snapshots. And this is taking advantage of a different application within our system, is to be able to take a snapshot on that different application and then do comparisons so that you can see on a side-to-side basis or what are the changes in the configuration. So over here, I have the options to take a snapshot, prior to the upgrade, post the upgrade and mark as the default if you want, or to do a pre and post so that you can see, what did the configuration look like before, what did the configuration look like after, and easily to be able to identify any changes in commands and so forth. So in this case here, once I select the devices, they're going to be listed, grouped by SKU numbers. And as this is the first version, right, of OS Manager, that we've moved from OS Upgrade. In this version, we currently have opted to expose, let's group devices by the SKU number. But these fields here can be filled in based on any information that is figured out, anything that has already been discovered about this device. We can expose this to group by the, devices that are running a specific OS version, devices that match this specific platform, this specific series, devices, group devices by vendor. So this can be easily added. It's simply typing the column, and then that column will be populated here. So once I've selected the devices, the next step is to pick, for each type of device, what are the images that I want to select. In this case, for this 9500 series, I already have one selected, but essentially this is the option to where I get to pick, hey, let's make the images available only from catalog, or any of the images available within the file system. In this case, my user, I have enough privileges that I can do either or, but if I was a user that could only do catalogs, this would be the only option, and I would not have an option to pick from any other images. All right, so this is where you have, hey, this image has been approved, has been validated, has been tested. It's been working in our lab for the past 2 months. Now we're okay with pushing it to production, so therefore the image has been pushed to the catalog. So let me just back out here. So once I have completed and selected, I can do the same thing for this device. Once I have completed and selected the images that I want to upgrade to, then the plan is ready to be validated. And as you can see, I'm not ready to run the OS upgrade until this plan has been validated. Now, this validation plan is identifying the health of the devices, making sure the device, what the device is in the stack, right? Hey, does the stack work okay? Or is the image, everything is communication with the file server okay? And it's doing additional checks before we proceed with the upgrade. So in this case here, the upgrade is completed, no errors detected. So I'm going to go back, and now I have the option, hey, once this has been validated and this is the status of my plan, and I can either schedule it or run now, right? So I'll go ahead and do a run now for this upgrade. And while that's running, I'll touch on one that I've already ran and kind of show and discuss over the logs, right? What are some of the steps? And you can see the steps that Gluware is taking, right? And we can follow the logs for those devices. But I want to discuss one that has already been completed here. That way that I can talk more and show all of the details that go in the log. But as Gluware touches each device, there is a set of steps that are being done. And we keep the logs for, we have the logs for each plan. And then within the logs for each plan, we have the logs for each device, right? And that's from the minute that Gluware logs into a device, all of the commands that we're executing, whether we're identifying, detecting the device type, we're detecting whether the device, any modes that the device is running on, and and determining the type of upgrade that the device needs. In some cases, we always try to automate based on the vendor recommendation upgrade path. Whether the device is in bundle mode or install mode, we do what the vendor suggests for that specific platform. But the system automatically, or the platform automatically determines on what to do, right? On which one to do and what's the best method. So in this case here, the device is doing initial detection. It's making sure that everything is okay, right? It's checking the state of my stack there. And, it's returning all of the information that has found. We're able to detect, the power modules, serial numbers, where they're located, so on and so forth. And at the same time, we're trying to see what the device is capable of. We're trying to determine whether the device doesn't have a running, as the is the startup configuration different from the running configuration, right? So we're checking for things like that before we do an upgrade. And an example of that, and if I bring up this one here, that I intentionally created a failing point to show how when the configuration is in a non-saved state, right, we make sure that, hey, Gluware will go ahead and stop that, so that we're not upgrading the device, and any configuration that was made will no longer be, that configuration was lost, or it could possibly bring the device offline. So as the file transfer, as everything, the health checks is made okay, the system does, identify boot statements. In the case whether the system is used an install mode, right, we check the boot statement with the packages.conf file. We identify the files that are referenced within the packages.conf file, and we verify to make sure that they actually exist in the file system, right, before we are making any changes, and the system is not being rebooted with missing files. But the system is checking whether there's enough storage. If there's enough storage, do we need to clean up the file system, right? So we do a file system cleanup prior to the install, and you're seeing here the system is checking, making sure that all those files are there. It checked, the stack 1, it's checking stack 2 here, and it's doing the same process. It will do the same process on however many devices that are a member of that stack. And of course, we try to do the recommended install to use the command that will install all, right? So that it installs in one device, and then it's doing the automated copy to install from device to device. But additionally, one other thing that I wanted to highlight here that we do is we do put essentially a lock file in the system to make sure that, if you're an organization and it's possible that you have multiple Gluware engines, or it's possible that you have different teams that can manage the same device, and we want to make sure that you're not running an upgrade on that device at the same time. Therefore, we add this additional file that will check on that, and Gluware is always checking for that file, and it's just a simple text file with some text in it, and it's removed at the end of it. But once that's done, then it's a matter of, okay, we're going to initiate the file transfer. Let's identify whether the file is there or not. We do a file cleanup. So for any images, if the image is already in the flash, we see that we create a Gluware OS folder. We'll move that file to the Gluware OS folder. We'll do the cleanup so that we're not losing that file that will be removed during the cleanup. Once the cleanup is done, we'll go and identify the file that needs to be transferred. We'll do the file copy, right, which will be down here. And after the file copy, then we perform the install in all members. Once the install is complete, then we'll issue the reload command for the device. And of course, it's setting the correct boot statements. It's making sure that set the config register, right? So it's setting all of the correct settings that need to be set, and checking everything before it's reloading your device. And of course, and that's what you're seeing down here, right? So the device doesn't have any reload. We're gonna do the reload. Let's see, the install. So this is the reload part, where the system is reloading the device, and it waits for the device to come back up. And then once the device comes back up, it verifies that, hey, is this the version that I intended to upgrade to? And only at that time, it will run the same set of commands that we ran before to identify the platform. Is everything healthy? Any additional pre-post health check commands that needs to be run, compare that data that needs to be sent, and of course, whether I remove that lock command that was sent earlier. Right. So this is one that was completed. We have, there's another one here that was upgraded in ISR. And if needed, we can check progress on the upgrade that we're currently running on here. And you just see that one of them is already in a reboot and waiting for the device to come back up, while the other one is still, it's tracking the package file transfer, so on and so forth. Right. So, and of course, if there is in the case of a failure, like this, in the case of a failed upgrade for a device, there is always an option to create an OS plan from failures. So meaning that, hey, for my devices that did not fail, I want to go ahead and try to troubleshoot it, or I need to go ahead and upgrade that device. Or in this specific case for this device, it had a configuration that was in an unsaved state. So I was able to go on the device to go ahead and save it, verify that everything needed to be there. And I say, okay, now I need to go, create a new plan for my failures. And from that point on, again, I can pick the image that's available in my inventory or for my catalog for this specific type of platforms. Hit save. And then at that point, I'll be able to go and validate it. And that concludes the demo for OS Manager. And I'll leave the last 8 minutes here for open questions, if any.
Yeah, great, Alex. If you could stop share, I will bring up the final slide. So let's go through Q&A real quick, but as some people might want to drop off, We ask if you're interested in Gluware, one thing you can do is go take the test drive. So if you go to gluware.com/test-drive, you can request access to a system and you can kick the tires on most of the applications. The OS Manager is not part of the test drive yet, but we will be adding it in early 2020. So as a New Year's gift to you, you will soon be able to take you kick the tires and actually execute OS upgrades on the test drive platform. So if you have specific questions or would like to engage with our team, contact us at sales@gluware.com and request a demo or request a meeting, and we will get that set up. So I have a few questions here. Let's run through them. One is, how does Gluware deal with slow links for remote file servers? Is it reliable? So yes, it's highly reliable. We use the rsync protocol. And so we will, once that sync has initiated, we will continue to retry and keep retrying until the sync is complete. So even if that link is, a slow T1 or a satellite link or whatever it may be, Gluware will be very resilient in using our sync protocol to execute that file transfer out to that remote site. Next, how is Gluware licensed or sold? So Gluware is licensed on a per node basis. So it's really like about the number of network nodes that you're bringing under Gluware for management. And then either per app or you can license the whole app suite. The applications are very complementary, so most of our customers like to have access to the full suite. However, if you have a particular pain point like just OS upgrade or you just want to do audit, you can start that way as well. Next, can I execute state checks, I'm assuming operational state checks, before and after an OS upgrade? That is a great question. Yes, you can. Gluware introduced a productization of state assessment here in 3.6. That is exposed through config modeling. So you would go into config modeling and execute your state assessment, and you can do that before and after your OS upgrade. We are looking at, and then additionally to that, it could be stitched together via workflow. So I mentioned workflows can do explicit things on different Gluware apps and make it all one workflow. So that could be most workflows that we do are kind of rapidly developed by Gluware for the customer. And then also to note that if you notice what Alex did, one of the options when you're setting up your plan is to execute a drift before and after. So that's an example where another app, config drift, is being triggered from your OS upgrade to show you if anything has changed in the config. And we are looking at also stitching together, being able to expose enabling a pre and post operational state check. So stay tuned for that. Certainly something we're looking at. Next, if a configuration needs to change or there's a syntax change after an upgrade, how does Gluware handle that? Okay, so first of all, the drift, as I mentioned, would identify that. And what we recommend is, obviously you should be testing this in your lab prior to doing it on production devices. So you should be aware of what's changing, but certainly drift will highlight for you if the vendor changed the way a command is, or maybe added more or removed some default configs or whatever happened. With Gluware, we handle that with our config management piece, which is called config modeling. So if you're managing features with Gluware, let's say you're managing NTP and it's instead of NTP space peer, it's NTP dash peer, you would update your policy in Gluware and then just reprovision the node to keep that in sync. So absolutely, yes, we certainly can do that. Next is, does Gluware support role-based access? Yeah, I think, Alex covered a bit of that, so hopefully you saw that, but currently today we have 5 different levels of role-based access, and our Q1 release will support custom levels, where you could define explicitly what users have the ability to do. And then Gluware has integrated radius, so we can manage users, or we can integrate with customer-provided LDAP or customer-provided radius, so we can map into your systems to manage the users. Let's see how we're doing on time here. Okay, 3 minutes. I can probably do 3 more questions. How can Gluware provide user access to specific devices but not others? Okay, that's also a very good question. Alex touched on it. We have the capability of what you would consider multi-tenancy. And for us, a tenant is called an organization. And so for each organization you build in Gluware, like Data Center East, Data Center West, Firewall Group, WAN, you could build these tenants, and then you assign the devices into those tenants, and then you assign users into the tenant. So if I had folks only managing firewalls, I could build that group of devices and then only assign the users to have visibility of those. So that is how we handle that in terms of defining users and defining organizations. How does Gluware scale? How many concurrent devices can it manage? So Gluware does not have a set upper limit in terms of the total number of devices you can define in the system. We have tested very, very high, and we have customers in the many tens of thousands. So ultimately, scale is not an issue for Gluware, and Gluware, being software, has underlying compute that you can continue to expand the compute underneath from a CPU, memory, storage to deal with that as well. But I think when you're talking about scale, you're really talking about the important question to ask is how many concurrent changes do you want to make? Because when Gluware starts, let's say, working hard, it's establishing connections to all these devices and interacting with them and performing drifts and audits and things like that. So Gluware is a few releases ago, we enabled the ability to be a distributed system. So the piece of Gluware that goes and initiates connections to those devices to make the changes called a provisioning engine. We can have as many additional provisioning engines as you would like to have. Those would be installed as separate virtual machines if you're running on-prem. And by scaling up the number of provisioning engines, we're able to actually meet the desired scale. So, a side note, a technical note is each provisioning engine has two, sub-engines, like a engine 0 and an engine 1, which can have up to 50 concurrent jobs. And then Gluware actually has queues as well, and queue management, because some jobs, like an OS upgrade, is a very long job. Other jobs, like an inventory, is a short job. And so Gluware handles and manages that. But we have achieved a lot of scale for a recent customer last fall. They wanted Gluware to demonstrate doing like a drift on 10,000 devices in under an hour. And we showed that using 6 provisioning engines. So again, all depends on the number of provisioning servers and the amount of compute allocated to them. Last question, does Gluware validate the image is compatible with the device? So first of all, as I mentioned, we highly recommend you pre-test and the image and you explicitly populate it in your approved catalog. That being said, for Cisco, if we have the option to enable API integration for some specific API calls, one of them, we can validate the image is compatible. We'll use it to validate the image is compatible with the device, and we'll also pull the checksum, so we're able to validate the image as whole once transferred. So that is not an extra cost. We do, the customer has to provide those API tokens and then establish that configuration in Gluware so we can leverage those. So I think that's it. Alex, thanks very much for showing us that live demo. We will wrap there. Again, thanks very much for attending. We're early planning for a January webinar to dive into more about state assessment and our workflow capability. So with that, we'll conclude. Please contact us or take the test drive. And you can check our webinar page online on gluware.com, go to webinars, and you can see previous webinars, including the November webinar we did last month. Thanks very much. Have a great holiday.